Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this webinar this afternoon. Today we're going to be making the case for interactive email, as you can see on the screen. If you could just let me know that my audio is working, and we'll get right into it. Feel free to drop a question and just say, "Yep, your audio is working," and I'll have some fun going through all those questions. So we're going to be talking about what's possible, beautiful, and relevant in interactive email. And it's not going to be me talking. My name's Alex. I'm going to be moderating, but I'm going to be passing over to these three brilliant speakers. So we have Heidi Olsen from EROI. If you want to catch her on Twitter, I'm sure everyone here uses Twitter. Just hit at Swiss Webmiss, and it's a senior developer at EROI. It's going to be talking about lots of great stuff today. It's joined by another excellent member of EROI, excuse me, tough name to say, Cher Fuller, who is a strategist, and we'll be talking a lot about how to get client buy-in, that sort of thing. And then last but definitely not least, we're joined by Email and Acid's very own Justin Koo, who anybody who knows anything about interactive email knows Justin, and he'll be talking about lots of advanced techniques and how you can get interactive emails working in your emails. Just before we get started, I'm going to go for a few quick housekeeping bits. This webinar is not launched properly, I've just realised. There we go, much better. Sorry people, I forgot to launch the webinar properly. You can blame that on me. So I'll do the introduction all over again. So welcome to today's webinar. Today we're making the case for interactive email. If everyone could let me know that the audio is now working, that would be good because I messed up big time there. So just drop a question saying working. Wow, okay, yeah, working, perfect. So my name's Alex. I'm going to be moderating. I'm not going to bore you too much about myself. I'm going to hand it over to our speakers. Just going to introduce them real quick. So we've got three great speakers today. Heidi Olsen from EROI. She's a senior developer there, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. If you want to follow her on Twitter, it's at Swiss Webmiss. And then we've got Cher Fuller, also from EROI, and I got the name right that time, so that's fun. It's going to be talking about how we're getting client buy-in, how we can get people to really take on interactive email, and she's at Cher Fuller, nice and easy Twitter handle. And last but not least, we've got Justin Koo from Email and Acid. I'm sure a lot of you know Justin, but he doesn't need an introduction, so you can find him on Twitter at Fresh Inbox. Just before we get in and start here, I'm going to answer some quick questions, which are very popular questions. One that's not on this slide, you will be able to catch a recording of this webinar. We make sure we record our webinars, and we'll be pushing out the link to that shortly. Everyone who's here will be getting a link to that. If you do use Twitter and you do want to tweet along with us, let us know that I'm annoying, you want to hear from the speakers, that sort of thing, audio's not working, all of those fun things. You can tweet along with hashtag #BetterEmailsEI. And we do have some time earmarked at the end to have some questions and answers. We might not be able to get through all of them, but we'll get through as many as we can. So innovation in email is a tough topic, Cher? A lot of people get confused by it. So where do you think people are getting mixed up with innovation in email and interactive email?
Yeah, I mean, innovation can be so many things to so many different people, and frankly, you can really have two totally extremes. So we have people that just really want to do a simple email. They want to just make it one big old image that really forces your user to go to a single destination. And then you have people that fly all the way over to the polar opposite side and want the whole kitchen sink in an email. So we have people that are asking, let's add a video, and can we start making it play music when you click on it, when they open the email? And generally we would say no to that. So, we need to look at, what is innovation in this sense. So, we want to level set on some things. Innovation doesn't always mean complicated technology use. However, its use should be used to really build around an idea or a new way to tell your story. So there's a lot of things that we need to remember. Your users receive a lot of emails every single day. And it's our job to make something that's beautiful enough to fight through the noise and honor the request that the user gave us by asking for your content. I mean, if a user dropped in their email to you, they're basically saying, hey, you have a front row spot on my screen to tell me whatever you want to and show me whatever you want to. So the content that we need to be making should really honor that request. And our emails need to be focusing on people marketing over brand marketing. You know, it's not fun to just constantly get things that are talking about the brand. We really need to think about who we're talking to and what their needs are. So the innovation was always enhance the experience for the user, because what we're ultimately doing is providing moments that establish brand credibility, which in turn really creates brand loyalists that actually want to open your emails and are looking forward to that next send.
Absolutely. So that's you know, that's touched on what innovation is in email. It's a great description. So we pass it along to Heidi. She's going to tell us what innovation isn't, because that's another thing I think people can get confused with.
Yeah, I think people see other brands integrating like kinetic or interactive techniques in their emails, and they feel pressure to follow suit. But you want to make sure that your motivation is legit and ask yourself the following questions. Does it enhance experience for the user? Does the technique support a business goal like increased conversions or engagement? And then next, you need to ask if your subscribers' email clients can even support the technique. For example, if you are a B2B client, you want to maybe avoid spending the resources on something interactive like tabs, and instead leveraging like background images and animated GIFs that would be supported in those clients. And integrating innovation can also be a learning opportunity to understand your user's behavior. And so if there's nothing to learn from it, maybe it's something to pass on. And last but certainly not least, and something that I need to check myself on, is if you're just wanting to figure out what the next cool thing in email is, maybe that's not the right motivation. It is a really exciting time to be in email marketing now that clients are starting to support more interactive techniques. And it's tempting to try to experiment and push those boundaries, but the strategy should always dictate the innovation and not the other way around. You can't use your client's email as your own personal sandbox, or you can run the risk of missing the objective and then losing your client's trust.
Absolutely. So just to recap, innovation is good, but innovation for the sake of innovation, not so good. It has to serve a purpose. That's very important. So one question I think we get a lot here, probably the most common interactive email question, is about getting the buy-in and how do we get people excited to do interactive emails. So, you know, how do we start getting buy-in? I think, Shay, you're going to talk to us about client buy-in, right? How you've managed to get clients to buy into interactive emails.
Yeah. Well, you know, we all know that email is a high performing channel for e-commerce, and it commonly converts better than most channels. So one of the great things is really knowing the strength of your channel, because pulling all those metrics and understanding the value that you provide to the client is really, really important. So if you understand those strengths, and you can kind of put yourself in a position to push back on how it's used, and it really gives you room to stand your ground on the type of content that you're making for email. So when we're looking at email, you know, some of the things that we really focus on so that when we are pitching innovation within our email, are, you know, some of the following. So we really look at that conversion factor, because at the end of the day, you know, if we're not, if the email isn't supporting the business goals, which ultimately is to turn a profit, we can't really justify just creating something for the sake of creating something. But with that in mind, we also want to look at engagement. So we have two terms that we use in-house at eROI or eROI, either one's fine, is we look at low commitment clicks versus high commitment clicks. So to us, a low commitment click is something that someone does where they're just clicking, they're interacting, and the click does not force them to purchase something. A high commitment click is knowing that you're going to be clicking on a buy now CTA, or you know, you're going to be going onto a landing page to actually convert. So differentiating between those two, of a low commitment click versus a high commitment click, allows us to separate conversions from engagements, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be a brand that only asks people to buy stuff from you. It's like, if your friend calls you every weekend to come help them move, you stop answering their calls because you're like, what am I getting out of this? This isn't cool. So if you're that brand that's always like, buy now, buy this, buy that, people are going to stop opening your emails because that's all that they expect from you. So we really want to establish that engagement so that people have fun when they open our emails, and they know that we're not just always trying to take advantage of them. Next, we really want to look at data collection. So we're moving into this era of hyper-personalization, and that personalization comes from knowing the people that you're talking to. And when you know someone, you talk to them differently. So this really helps us to tailor the creative that we're sending to our users, and make sure that we're giving them the things that they like because they've asked for it or they've shown us that they like the different pieces of content. And then looking at your brand values. So we want to understand, what does the brand value in terms of innovation? For us, we work a lot on Taco Bell, and that's a brand that really, really pushes the experiences and pushes the moments because that's who they are as a brand and that's what they believe in. So we want to make sure that we're transferring that experience to our users as well through email and living up to the brand name. And then finally, we always want to be creating a culture of email enthusiasts. We want people that look forward to the emails. We want people that tell their friends about it, that forward it on. So these are all of the types of things that if we can prove the case for these 5 qualities to our client and say, this email, we're going to use this technique, but it's driving engagement, it's driving conversions, and it's getting more people into your database, we can get them to start understanding why those techniques matter and why they start moving the needle.
Right, and I think that's a good point. Getting people to be excited about your emails, that's everyone's dream with their emails, right? We want people to be excited and happy to receive the emails. So that's a lot of good information on client buy-in, but I think we're going to talk a little bit about internal buy-in because not everybody has clients. Some people have got bosses or co-team members to convince, right? So, what about your internal team at eRoy?
Yeah, when I talk to even other email marketers, the biggest challenge that I always hear is about like resourcing, skill set, and passion. Because there's no getting around it. If you want to create an interactive experience that isn't out of the box, you're going to need time and a lot of it. And you're going to need someone who actually knows how to code those techniques. And that's kind of hard for a lot of companies to have. But the most important thing in my mind is passion. Because creative interactive emails may require staying late nights and weekends to get the job done. And the only way you'll get your members on your team to volunteer for that is if they feel passionately about the email as you do. So a couple ways to get buy-in is you need to start collecting data. This includes read rates and email client usage, time of engagement, and data about your subscribers' preferences. And then when you come to the table with a strong business case for why you should include interaction in your email, it's easier to get people on board. And to alleviate the amount of work for your team, you can create a system of components or reusable modules that can help save you time, and then you can focus on the fun stuff. And likely if you're listening, you're probably already familiar with the amazing community of email marketers that are out there. There's so many different places to get involved with the community. There's the Email Geeks Slack channel using the hashtag on Twitter. There's even a Women of Email group on Facebook, which me and Cher are both members of and love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even signing up for emails that are about email, as meta as that sounds, is amazing. A couple that I can recommend off the top of my head, and there's several, so we should get a thread started on Twitter about this. But Table TRTD is a really fun email to subscribe to because they are really just trying to experiment and have a lot of fun with different techniques they can use. There's also Email Weekly by Action Rocket. They were really kind of the first people to pioneer using CSS grids in email, and it's also full of really good content. And of course, lastly, Email and Acid has a really great blog. Justin and Alex both write a lot of really amazing tutorials for how to actually create these interactive techniques that I love looking forward to. And lastly, but the most important, is to involve your coworkers in the process early. When their ideas and thoughts are being accounted for, they're more likely to want to put in that effort.
Yeah, I think that's great points. I have to jump. We're going to go a little bit off topic and off kilter, and we're going to jump straight into a question. I think it's quite relevant to what you're talking about here. Someone's asking, do you really need passionate employees, or do you, it's not right to ask people to do 9 to 5s evenings. That's sort of, people working outside their times. But I get what you guys think of it in a second. But to me, some people enjoy doing this stuff. I don't think anyone's suggesting here that you should work for free outside of your working hours. I just want to say that that's not something we're going to say that people should be doing. It's more coming into work and being excited to do interactive email. It's certainly a challenge. I mean, there's lots of times I've done it when I've had to turn to Justin and say, Justin, save me. But just wanted to clarify that point. So still on the topic of internal buy-in, and we've still got these mystery Vs on the slideshow, but how does your team decide what's worthy of innovation?
Yeah, so something that we start with when we approach innovation is to get real. So the question you just asked is actually kind of a perfect segue, because different techniques take different amounts of time, and there have been times where Heidi has been here, working on something crazy, but like we believed in it so much and we were so excited about it. And how we get there is really by looking at this chart. So we start by looking at the brief from the client and understanding what are their business goals, what are they trying to accomplish, and then that really dictates our strategic approach and the different avenues that we take. So we start by brainstorming various tactics, and this is an account manager's nightmare where we say any and everything that we think would be a good idea, but we keep ourselves in check by plotting it on a chart similar to this. So we start by asking, does this technique meet the business goal, and then what is the ease of implementation for this email?
Mm-hmm. And so if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see how we kind of filter that out. So if you're thinking about like a hover state for a CTA, that's super easy to implement, but it also fulfills a business goal because it communicates to the user that the CTA is clickable, which then could help with the conversion. So that's an easy win. Whereas if you look on like the bottom right-hand corner video, maybe that's something that people were really excited about. Like, wouldn't it be fun if we put video in an email? Like, sure. However, it's not super easy to implement. It's not supported that greatly, and if it doesn't fit the business goals of that specific campaign, like, let's just kind of put that out for later. And so if something does fall into this red, it doesn't mean that you'll never do it. We have kind of a toolbox that we put a lot of these like crazy ideas in, and so when it makes sense, we'll actually go ahead and bring that out again and kind of dust it off and see if it still applies.
Absolutely. Yeah, so internal buy-in's tough to get. I see what you're saying there. We've definitely had pushback on a few things, and other things people have been really excited to do, but you're right, it's all about prioritizing what's the best for your business and your business goals. I'm seeing a lot more questions come in, by the way, people. We will get to them at the end, but a lot of them are about to be answered as we go on to tactics. So now we've spoken about theoretical getting buy-in and getting people excited for it. So now these guys from eRoy are going to tell us some really exciting stuff about, how did you guys put these tactics into play? How did you use these with Taco Bell, which I'm sure everybody knows the name Taco Bell?
So one of our first interactive, if you want to call it that, emails that we did for Taco Bell was shortly after we had the partnership. And Taco Bell was launching this loyalty app called Explore. And Explore really dived into early adopters and people who latch onto onto new adventures. And there was puzzles involved, there was rewards. It was really cool, but its success really depended on it being shared socially, because Taco Bell has a really strong Twitter channel, and so we really needed people to use that hashtag to have other people adopt it. And so we could have done something like a share on Twitter call to action, which maybe would have worked. But instead, we were really like, well, how do we like kind of create this wonder within the email? And so looking at their email client usage, we saw that the large percentage was WebKit rendering engine, which is like your iPhone, iPad, Apple Mail, a couple different Outlooks. And what that meant is that we could use CSS animations. So as you can see in like the GIF, it goes from not sometime but right now to no time but now. It was really easy to implement. But what it did is it gave a kind of a sense of like, oh, what is it? And maybe like curiosity. And so people maybe went onto Twitter to actually use it or to follow it. And we could have done this with a GIF for sure, but accessibility is important. And we wanted to make sure that if images were turned off, that they would still get that message.
Yeah, it's a good email. I like it. You know, I have to admit I hadn't seen this one to this presentation. I've seen the next one, and you know, the next one I'm excited to show people.
Yeah, and so after that, that was kind of like our first like having to like have the client trust us. Like, yes, this isn't going to work in every single client the same way, but that's okay. And so when the next challenge came, the next big campaign was when Taco Bell wanted to launch their breakfast menu. And we knew we had to go big. We had to show that Taco Bell breakfast stacked up against their competitors because a lot of people didn't consider Taco Bell as like a breakfast food. And so instead of just telling our subscribers like, yeah, Taco Bell's better, we needed to like show them. And so we thought about creating this scrolling experience where these three characters went about their day after having Taco Bell breakfast, nothing, and then a competitor. Also, the fun thing that I have to note about this email is that all of us on the Taco Bell team are in the email. Cher actually got lucky because she's like the cute blonde girl where I'm like the actual Taco Bell cashier. But I do look great, so I'm totally happy about it. Anyways, moving on. So to help support this technique, we had to look at time of engagement in previous emails because we didn't understand whether this more interactive experience was going to be as successful as like a shorter, succinct message. I think as marketers, we always hear about, you know, fearing the scroll and focus on above the fold, which, you know, doesn't exist, obviously. But without like looking at your actual data, you can't be sure. And we were surprised to find that the majority of their mobile subscribers were more engaged than their desktop counterparts, with an average of 20 seconds on the email, which is, I mean, an email marketer's dream. So that provided us with the opportunity to create kind of this rich experience for the subscribers without thinking that they wouldn't scroll down to it. And that data helped us pitch the technique that would only work in iPhones, which while it's a huge percentage of their client share, it's still not everybody. But we figured out a graceful fallback, and with an obscene amount of testing later, and this one was a doozy, we were able to deploy it. But what's really crazy about this email that I don't think we've really shared is that while the engagement was extremely high, it didn't convert as well as we hoped right out the gate. And that was like a huge bummer for us because like, but it's so great, we've spent so much time on this. But then, plot twist, flash forward 6 months later, and we found out that it was one of our highest converting emails because people were actually coming back to the email and then clicking through and buying, which is obscene.
Yeah, crazy. I think that's everyone's dream, right? That's always the argument between emails like this is people only view emails once and then they leave. But I mean, if you've got data saying otherwise, that's great. And you know, next time I'm stateside, I need to grab a Taco Bell breakfast, I think.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. Moving on to your next example.
Yeah, so this was our holiday email that we did for Taco Bell, and holiday emails tend to be really challenging because you're having to fight against everyone that wants to, you know, spread holiday cheer with their clients. So the user's inbox is super maxed, and they're planning their vacations, they're thinking about all the things they forgot to buy for their mom. So we knew that we really needed to hit this one out of the park. So we actually decided to take a different approach with how we strategized this email. So what we did was we started by doing an audit of our top performing emails based on volume of engagement for both email and on-site behavior. So some of the things that we were looking at were open rates, click rates, conversion rates, time on site, and pages viewed. So you know, we pulled all of that out, all those numbers, metrics, and then really identified, you know, what were our top 5 performers with an average of all the things that we were looking at. So not what was our highest converting email, not what was our highest engagement, but with all of those factors combined together, what were those top 5? And then what we did from there was pull from the audit all of the successful traits that we found within those emails. So some of the things were, you know, moving parts or animation. We had illustrations and lo-fi. We had some type of interactive story, a full email narrative from top to bottom. And then people really, really love character and role-playing games. So we rolled all of that together for our holiday email to say, okay, what kind of experience can we give our users that's going to touch on all of these things? And then we created this holiday email for our users.
And I think, like, while the interactive tabs are super fun to make, and it's like, you know, kind of an interactive technique, I think what's really like innovative about this email was the storytelling component. And so Spencer Foxworth and Sean Sanford, copywriter and designer, are an amazing duo, and they did such a good job of making this like a really rich story. Like, it felt like a choose your own adventure that you would read when you're a kid. And I feel like that was a big value to our users, to have something kind of fun in an email to like kind of click through, that wasn't like outwardly like buy, buy, buy. And instead of like all the noise that you would have to see with all the holiday campaigns.
Yeah, and on this one, you know, it's a choose your own adventure where you're clicking on every single one of the components up top to see which path will take you to Taco Bell. And the engagement that we saw on this email was through the roof because, you know, plot twist, everybody chose the turbo sleigh first, which was the right answer, but then they would click back through because they wanted to see all of the possible options. And again, this was another email that a lot of people came back to time and time again, and that got shared on a lot of different platforms because people were just excited that they could play with an email.
Right, and it goes back to what you were saying before when you were talking about the storytelling part of this being the innovative part. Like you said before, you don't always need to have crazy code and crazy things going on for it to be different and for it to surprise and delight your subscribers. Sometimes just a good story and a unique way of keeping people on the email is all it takes, right?
Yeah, and basically just kind of like the last bit is just kind of some like pro tips that we've learned throughout the time.
Learn from our hardships.
Our mistakes. Please don't make the same ones. So best practices. Definitely live test on various devices on different operating systems. With the scrolling breakfast email, and I know Justin knows this because we've talked about it quite a bit, that one was crazy because it would work on like iPhone 4, but then it would break on iPhone 5, and then it would get it on iPhone 4 and iPhone 5, but then iPhone 5 in a different operating system would break. And you just need to have all those devices handy to be able to like actually make sure that all those variances won't break your email. So what we do at eRoy is we actually have a spreadsheet, and so every single employee we ask like, what's your phone type and like what's your operating system? And at first they think we're kind of like crazy, but then we explain to them like, well, no, this is for QA. And we also have like some dedicated QA devices that we just use for that. And to get started, especially if you're getting client buy-in or an internal team buy-in, is to go ahead and create a prototype to ensure that the technology is supported. Oftentimes you might see like another brand do something innovative and you're like, oh cool, we'll just do something kind of similar. But you really want to make a prototype for your business needs and like how you'd want to lay it out, because then you can better communicate to your designer or to the rest of your team how that needs to be built, because there's so many different limitations that you might not notice just by experiencing it. And then you want to ensure fallbacks in other clients. It's totally cool to not have the email operate the same way across all clients, absolutely. But you do want to make sure that the marketing message is there, because a lot of people don't get to control what like email client they use. Like sometimes they have to use Outlook and it's not their fault, so let's not punish them. So using a QA software like Email on Acid will show you what that email will render in multiple clients. And then, you know, if you're unsure of how successful this strategy will be, you want to A/B test. And so let's say you want to use like a hamburger menu for your navigation on mobile because you think that it takes up too much real estate, but then you have a team member who's like, no, I really want the navigation to be full and you want to be able to see everything. We'll just test it. And then you don't have to have an opinion about it. You can use the data to support what's more successful. And at the very least, never be afraid to ask for help. I can contribute any of my success is having a really good community of people to rely on and be like, hey, is this working in your client? Or, hey, have you looked at this? Specifically with that last tabbed example, I relied on Justin to help me figure out how to track those clicks because, you know, without it, we couldn't really understand how successful it was.
Yes. Sorry, I was coughing into a muted microphone. I'm just to reiterate, we do have some question and answers time at the end. I'm seeing all these questions pop up. We will have some good answers for them, but we're going to wait till the end. Now I'm going to be passing across to talk about some techniques for interactive email. And I know the examples are great. Everyone likes examples, but you know, everyone wants to find out how to do it, right, Justin? So, I mean, we've got a lot of people here that want to try this out. So, what's the support like is a common question we're getting, and how complex is this stuff to kind of put into use and start using straight away?
Yes, as I'm sure you all know, not all clients are created equal. So email clients can generally be broken down into 3 categories. Those with broad interactive email support, limited interactive email support, and no interactive email support. For those that has no support, I think everybody knows it's Outlook for Windows as well as Outlook.com. Clients that have broad interactive email support also generally have support for CSS animations. That means things you can do things like fade in and fade out things, or have them fly in or slide in from the sides. And these clients include iOS, the iPhone, iPad, Apple Mail, Outlook for Mac, surprisingly, as well as the Samsung email client on Android. For those clients that have limited support, they also generally do not support CSS animations. And one of the downsides of clients that have limited support is that they tend to have problematic support for CSS, interactive CSS as well. And as a result, a lot of people who design interactive email prefer to just support the clients with broad support because it's a lot easier to make your designs work there. As for clients that there are different kinds of complexity in your designs. So, for example, they also can be broken down into 3 separate categories: simple, intermediate, and advanced. For simple designs, you can have things like rollovers, hover states, right? So basically, when you hover your cursor over an image, it can show you an alternative image, or you can kind of bring attention to your CTAs by having them change colors. You can also have things like animation effects. Animation effects allows you to kind of show things like fade in or snow, so that when your email is displayed in clients that don't support animations, they kind of appear static. But when it's displayed in clients like the iPhone, you can have things like things that come in from the side or fade in. You can also support things like a tab to expand and menus. These are also pretty straightforward things to implement, where you can hide some content initially, and you allow your recipients to tap to display them. Then when you come to things like intermediate, they usually require a lot more investment in order to create them. Thankfully, because of a lot of the community, there's actually a lot of templates out there that you can kind of base your designs on. So these are things like carousel. For example, this is an interesting unit by HP. You can do things like tabs. This is a very cool tab design by Hawaiian Airlines. And I really like the way they've incorporated gorgeous images in the backgrounds when you tap on each tab. And finally, this is a design by B&Q. It's a home improvement store in the UK. And this is a design for hotspots. So what you can do with hotspots is that you can put trigger elements in your images that when the recipient taps on them, it kind of shows you a little bit more about it. Naturally, if you have a lot of time and resources, you can actually go to do even really, really cool stuff. But usually that would require a lot of work. For example, in our case, we sent a design with a puzzle in it. So basically, the recipient has to kind of tap through a bunch of character combinations to spell out the word acid. And when they spelled it out, they're shown a coupon that they can use for our service. So coming back to the components of interactive email, as you've seen, the simple ones, they're pretty straightforward. They just use kind of a hover selector to trigger them, and CSS animations also, it's pretty straightforward. You can take web animations and you can apply them to your designs. But for the designs that go from intermediate to advanced, they normally involve a bit more work. And in our case, they usually involve 3 elements, basically the source element or the trigger element. You also involve a state element as well as a target element, where the element that you want to kind of target in your interactivity. And in email, that usually means a label where someone taps on it, and an input element like a checkbox or radio that's hidden that will kind of store that state, and a target element that will be affected either by changing the size or displaying it or hidden it. And all this is tied together using what's called a CSS sibling selector. As you can see, the code here on the right side, you can see the 3 different elements, and on the left side, you can kind of see how it's implemented. So you have a label that targets the ID of the checkbox. So when someone taps on it, it gets checked. And then following that, you have the target element. So at the bottom of the code block, you can see that when the checkbox is checked, right beside it is what's called a sibling selector. What sibling selector does is basically allows you to say, it says if it's checked, go find a downstream element with a class name target and change the background color to green. One of the things about interactive email is that because each interaction requires an input element, if you have a complex design, it can quickly become, involve a lot of different checkboxes in the email. And it could start to look like what's called a punch card. This term was kind of invented, the punch card method for interactive email was invented by Mark Robbins because he worked at Rebel, and they create fairly complicated interactive email campaigns, and which can often involve up to 100 different interactive elements.
So, we're getting a lot of these questions pop up, Justin. Great explanation, by the way. I don't think I could have explained interactive labels that easily, but get a lot of questions popping up, and they have a common theme. How hard is this to do? It looks complicated. It looks like it takes a long time. But you've figured out a better way, right, Justin? You've got a new technique for interactive emails, and it makes it easier and quicker. Is that right?
Yes. And so what happens is that a lot of the interactive techniques require the involvement of all these sibling selectors and checkboxes. And I found a technique that that doesn't require using these things, but they don't support all kinds of interactivity. So I'm going to explain to you like where it comes in. The technique is called the Filmstrip Technique. And what it does is involve named anchors and stacked divs. And the way you stack them, it makes them look like a film strip. The really cool part about this technique is that it works on Gmail and Android. And it's the only technique the only fully interactive technique that currently works with Gmail and Android. It's also pretty straightforward to design, because what you're doing is that basically you're putting all the different states of your interactivity into its own frame instead of hiding elements within a module, you separate them out. And also the really cool part about this as well is that it supports, you can use this technique and send it in MailChimp. A lot of interactivity that involves checkboxes, you can't send with MailChimp because they strip it out. I'm not sure why they do that, but that's what happens. And a lot of times people kind of, a lot of people use it and they're kind of let down because they're not able to send these kinds of campaigns. Like I said, this Filmstrip technique you don't need it with simple designs because you already have other easier ways to do it. And with the advanced techniques, you pretty much need things like checkboxes because you're really doing really complex stuff. But with simple, with sort of intermediate designs, Filmstrip works best because it allows you to really cleanly design your interactivity into these really concrete frames. And here's what I mean. So just before I go into the design, I just want to kind of clarify what anchors, when I'm talking about named anchors, what they are. So an anchor is basically a kind of a link that points to another part of an email that has a named anchor. So normally in web pages, a named anchor, you put a named anchor so that you can kind of jump to that part of the page. With the Filmstrip technique, what you do is that you create multiple divs for each state, and they have fixed heights. And what you do is that you wrap each of them, you wrap all the frames within a single container that's sized to show only a single frame. So at any point, only a single frame is displayed. And then using links in the top, you could, let's just say when you press 3, it refers to the third frame. What's interesting is that email clients that support it will automatically display that frame. So you don't really have to do anything to display it. All you do is code anchors that point to name anchors, and when the recipient clicks on it, it will automatically display it. And here's what I mean, how it works. So for example, if you want to create like an interactive tabs, what you'll do is basically you create, again, let's say you have 3 tabs, you create all 3 designs stacked as a div, and you separate them with named anchors. And then within each component or each frame, you put the tabs in them that point to the other tabs that you need to go to using named anchors. So in this case, when someone taps on 2, it's a link to the second named anchor, and when someone taps on it, automatically the email client would move it up. And the same thing when you tap on the third one, it points to the third named anchor, and that would happen as well. With a carousel, it's the same thing. You can have thumbnails at the bottom, but you can also have arrows on the left and right. And the right arrow would basically point to the next frame, and the next frame's right arrow would also point to the next frame, and therefore you can move through the carousel like this. It doesn't mean that you need to kind of design your Filmstrip technique using sequentially. You can also make them jump, because as long as they're pointing to a named anchor that's in one of the frames, that's fine. So for example, this is like a hotspot technique where when someone taps on the top right hotspot, it jumps all the way to the third one. And on the third frame, there's a close icon. And the close icon is basically, again, it's an anchor that points to the named anchor of the first frame. So it goes back. Now, as I said, right now, the Filmstrip technique works for basically the 2 biggest clients for mobile, the iOS mail client, as well as the Gmail app on Android, which is the dominant client on in Android. However, it doesn't work for Apple Mail and Outlook for Mac, which are also interactive clients traditionally. And if you want to kind of add support for them, what you do is you kind of bring back the traditional sibling selectors and input selectors and combine them into your design. And here's what I mean. Basically, you'd basically have you'd have two sets of triggers, and then you display them based on which client has been displayed on. So for example, if you're on if you're displaying, if the email is opened in Gmail, you'd kind of display the named anchor set of tabs. And if the email is displayed in an iOS or Apple Mail, you'd hide that set of tabs, and you display a separate set of tabs that uses labels to trigger radio elements. And then when these radio elements are triggered, you use the sibling selector to kind of shift them manually. And you kind of do that using negative margins to move them within the container. So this is how you do that. I just published a post on the Filmstrip, what I call the Filmstrip Plus technique on the Email and Acid blog. So if you're interested to read more about how to implement something like that, you can head onto the blog and it will spell everything for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Justin. I think that's a really good explanation. I mean, you've obviously fairly recently showed me the Filmstrip technique, but I think it's brilliant. So we have about 10-15 minutes left. We're going to jump into some questions. We've got some key takeaways first, but if you do want to get a question in, we'll try and get through as many as possible, but no promises. So some takeaways to wrap up from what our speakers have been saying today. 3 great speakers. Create innovative experiences that enhance, not confuse the user. I think that's a good point. I think making sure that we're not using technology for the sake of technology is super important. Define how your message and techniques will add value to your client's business goals. Again, you have to make sure that everything you're doing is in line with a business need or a way to improve emails. Convert your client and internal teams to certified email geeks. I like that one. I think that's good. I think it's techniques like interactive email that get people excited to do email rather than coming into work and going, oh, I've got to send a HTML email today. And I'm sure everyone's had that kind of experience. Test. As an email testing company, it'd be a bit rude of us to not put that you should test on there. Experiment based on your skill, resources, and audience. Just to reiterate, you don't necessarily need to go crazy with technology to create an interactive email. Even add in some hover effects and some simple animations are really good, really fun to do. And have fun with your channel, because email should be fun. I think that's one of the things that keeps me coming back to email every day is email can be fun. We're in an email world where we can very quickly test, change things. No other channels give us that kind of quick feedback. So we hope everyone has found something useful from today. I'm going to now put everyone on the spot by throwing questions at them. So let's see if we can find some. So this question's come up a lot. Feel free, anyone, to jump in and answer this. People are asking about tracking interactive emails. Now, I think we can track each individual action in an interactive email. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Justin, Justin, you take this because you helped me with it.
Yes, I have a blog called Fresh Inbox, and if you Google for tracking actions in interactive email, you probably stumble upon them. Basically, what you do is you use background images. So the idea is that, with interactive email, you can kind of show and hide elements. With using the same selectors, you can also show and hide basically pixels that use background images. And one of the things is because background images are not loaded by default, if they are in the CSS block. You can load them when an action is triggered, and that's how you and basically you use them as pixels for like Google Analytics, and that's how you can track if someone has triggered an element or not.
Yeah, good, absolutely. So yes, to people asking, you can using a bit of extra work, but it's very worth it. You can track each interactive step and where people break down in the journey, if they do break down, if they make it to the end. So it gives you an extra layer of analytics on your subscribers, which is great. A lot of people asking about Filmstrip for Outlook, Justin. I'm sure you love that question, but do you want to give everyone a quick breakdown of how the fallbacks are working and why it's not going to completely screw Outlook?
Yeah, so as the basics of every interactive email is that you need to kind of design a fallback. So the idea is to show fallback by default, and then if a certain feature is present, you kind of show the interactive piece, and then you hide the fallback and you show the interactive piece. For Outlook, unfortunately, it doesn't work for any interactive. When we're talking about Outlook for Windows, it doesn't work for any interactivity. It doesn't even support hovers or even in animated GIFs. So unfortunately, it's not available there.
But you have the fallbacks, right? We're making sure it still works. So
yeah. So
Outlook users aren't used to the greatest email experience of all time anyway. So the fallbacks will make up for it, hopefully.
That's also one reason why something like email and asset would work best, is because what you want to do is you want to create a fallback first, and then as I said, you add the capabilities to test. You want to test the support in other clients, and then display the interactive elements. With something like email and asset, you can quickly take a look and see which version is being displayed in which client, so you can know if your fallbacks are appearing as they should.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So this is quite an interesting question for the EROI lovely ladies. Oh, no, I just lost it now. Here we go. It's Taco Bell. So this is an interesting question, and I think a lot of people will consider this as well. With the Taco Bell email, would you not have said that it was too long? Now, I'm sure you have a great answer for this. A bit of a long email takes a little bit of a while to get through.
Yeah, so it's definitely a consideration that we make a lot, because a lot of our emails have a really strong narrative and are highly illustrated, and so they're a lot longer than some emails. But because of how people were engaging with like previous emails that were kind of a considerable length, we knew that they were converting lower down because they were clicking like an order now button that was at the bottom of the email. But there are some technical considerations to make. If you're not doing, like, the scrolling experience, unfortunately, is no longer supported. But if you're doing like a really long email that's highly illustrative and you need to use like a lot of background images, you can only go a certain height of pixels before you have some issues with like Outlook. And then you also have that consideration with Gmail for it to actually truncate. But because this experience was built and optimized for iOS, we were able to get around that.
Yeah, I guess I would add, we've found that our long form scrolling emails perform well, but that doesn't mean that they're always appropriate for the email that we're trying to do, or the story and message that we're trying to convey. So we want to be really mindful of when we use those techniques. I mean, if the point of the message is a product launch, then it doesn't always necessarily make sense to go really long form. Like, sometimes we need to just get to the point. So I think that kind of takes it back to why you're using the innovation and what its purpose is, and what is the value to the user. So every single technique that we've seen be successful, we don't replicate every single time through email. We just cherry pick it a little bit when it's going to give the best experience for the user. And sometimes that needs to be every once in a while, so they don't take it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep throwing more questions at you to use up the rest of this time, and hopefully not throw too many curveballs. Is the code for your Taco Bell emails publicly available, or is there a blog about them? Those Taco Bell emails have been very heavily featured on blogs. I'm seeing a lot of questions like this. People asking for resources, somebody asking for Justin's blog. Justin's blog is freshinbox.com. We will post a blog after this, well, not directly after, but we will post a blog following this webinar, and we will include links to resources for, I'm seeing some questions about how to learn how to do interactive. We'll put links to interactive articles, Filmstrip articles, all that great stuff. Will an interactive email ever go to spam? That's an interesting question. Anyone feel like taking that one?
Yeah, just to go back to the previous point, that we have written blogs about the March email specifically, sorry, the breakfast email specifically, and also how we use data to support that. And the code is absolutely available. Most of those emails have been in a builder before, and which is basically a place where you can see the code. You can also put it in CodePen. But absolutely, code is for sharing. I mean, I've leveraged code that I've used with other people. For sure. I think that's what I love about this community so much, is that we're not trying to hide our experiences from people. But as far as spam, that's a really good question. We are really highly looking at our deliverability constantly. We haven't found that it has affected it. Our unsubscribe rates, our bounce rates, and all that stuff haven't jetted by any means. They stay consistent throughout all of those emails. I don't know, Justin, do you know if that affects it for some reason?
Yeah, from my discussion with the community, one of the concerns obviously is putting like form elements like checkboxes and radio elements, if it affects us with deliverability. So far as I can tell, it hasn't. And also, a lot of the big providers like Hotmail and Outlook.com and Gmail, they're starting to look at engagement more than just the content of the email. So if your email has high engagement, people open it and read it, generally they don't go into spam, regardless of the content in the email itself.
Right. It's a very common theme of deliverability these days. It's more content, more user behavior, as opposed to spam keywords or what you're sticking in there, within reason, obviously. I think for this one of these last questions, I think this is a good question. So the original question is, most of our list, we're B2B, most of our list is Outlook. Should we even bother with interactive email? But I think you can change that question. You could say most of our list is another email client, or we have somebody who's blocking it at work. And I think the answers are always the same, right? This is what you guys do with the EROI, is convincing people that although it might not seem like a traditional way to market to people or to advertise your services to people, as long as it's done in a good way, it's still going to have an impact, even if people are B2B, even if users are viewing it on their phone in 5 seconds, right?
Yeah, actually, a really good person to follow is Melanie Keeney. She works B2B almost exclusively, and she's talked a lot about like what kind of techniques you can use that maybe aren't like crazy innovative, but they definitely can help you stand out against other B2B clients. Because I mean, really, that's kind of like the goal, the objective, is not just to do something cool, but is to like stand out in the inbox and have people want to open your emails. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
Yeah, when we are looking at our emails, just, we know that Outlook is a big obstacle for us, so that we're always looking at the fallbacks. But what I would say is, sometimes we get so funneled into just the email view that we don't take a step back and look holistically at the whole, the whole user journey and how a human just interacts with their phone and with their content on a day-to-day basis. And so, some of the assumptions that we've had about email have been proven wrong through our testing. And, we have seen a lot of people that have clicked through even on the fallback just to be able to experience what they would be missing in the interactive part of the email. So I think I would never take for granted, what people want to see. And if you give them a reason and some type of incentive to want to click through, I think that people would be really surprised at how many people are actually clicking through to that fallback experience so that they can be part of something that represents the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point. I think that's also a great point to end on. Excuse me for coughing there again. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you've found it useful. I know that there's a lot of unanswered questions. We will try and answer as many as possible in our blog following this webinar. Obviously, thank you to Heidi, Cher, and Justin for imparting us with your interactive email wisdom. I think it was useful. I think there's a bit of everything for everyone, right? There's buy-in, there's development, there's data. Interactive email is exciting, and I don't think it's going away. If anyone has any final words, please do share.
I would say just don't take email for granted and have fun with it. I mean, people are looking one-on-one at your content. Personalize it, make it for them, make it for the people.
Yeah, I can't really beat that. She nailed it.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.